Welcome back, everyone, to Complete Aviation Solutions for another deep dive. This is number 47 for those keeping track at home. Today, we're going to be diving into something pretty weighty, actually. It's a developing legal situation with Boeing. The whole aftermath of the B737MX crashes in 2018 and 2019. It's a lot to unpack. You shared a report with me on this, and well, it's complicated and important, so let's get right to it.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's at the heart of it here is that Boeing is now reportedly trying to pull out of an agreement they had previously made to plead guilty in a criminal case. This case, and this is all according to what you've shared with me, of course, held them responsible for misleading regulators in the lead up to those tragic B737 AMAC accidents. This news came out on March 24th, and it seems to be based on information from people familiar with the situation.
Wow. Okay. So to rewind a bit for everyone, let's go back to that original guilty plea. This was back in July 2024. Can you walk us through what Boeing actually agreed to? What were the main points they committed to?
Sure. So in July 2024, Boeing agreed to plead guilty to conspiring to defraud the U.S. government, specifically related to those two B737-80 accidents. The crucial part of this is that the plea involved a pretty hefty fine up to USD 243.6 million. So a substantial penalty, but it allowed them to sidestep a full-blown criminal trial, which, could have been a lot messier and more damaging.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. That's a pretty significant step for them to take back then. But were there any other conditions tied to this original deal that are worth understanding? Things they had to do beyond just the plea and the fine.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The agreement also stipulated that Boeing would have an independent monitor appointed by the government to oversee their operations for 3 years. Imagine this person as a watchdog, basically, with pretty broad access to Boeing's inner workings and able to recommend changes to make sure they're compliant and focusing on safety. And on top of that, they also committed to investing USD 455 million to bolster their own internal compliance and safety procedures. So, guilty plea, big fine, external oversight, and a significant investment in improvements. It was a pretty comprehensive package.
Yeah, you're right. Sounds like a full set of consequences. Now, the report indicates they're trying to change things up, though. What's motivating this apparent change of heart?
Well, the report suggests they're aiming for a bit more leniency from the DOJ, the Department of Justice. What's interesting here is that this shift seems to coincide with the change in presidential administration, which is thought to be more willing to tweak parts of the agreement and potentially lighten the penalties. This kind of back and forth after a guilty plea, while not super common, can happen when there's a big political shakeup or, a change in the DOJ's focus.
And this is where things get really interesting for our listeners. This pushback seems to be especially centered on one specific part of the original agreement, right? The whole independent monitor thing.
That's exactly what the report highlights. Right now, the negotiations between Boeing and the DOJ are zeroed in on this independent monitor. It seems Boeing is really trying hard to avoid having this external oversight in place. Companies often resist this kind of scrutiny for obvious reasons. They might feel like they lose control, and there's always the chance of more potentially damaging information coming to light.
Makes sense. But what about that financial commitment to improving safety? Are they trying to back out of investing that big chunk of money too?
The report actually suggests otherwise. While the monitor is a sticking point, the people familiar with the situation seem to think that Boeing is still on board with investing over USD 400 million in improving their compliance and safety. So it looks like their main goal is to just shake off that independent monitor.
So now, this isn't the first time Boeing has tried to, let's say, navigate these legal issues, right? Didn't they try to avoid a guilty plea entirely before all this? Can you remind everyone about that?
Yeah, you're right. Back in 2021, they tried to dodge a guilty plea by using what's called a deferred prosecution agreement, or DPA. What you need to know about a DPA is that it's basically a deal where the prosecution agrees to put the charges on hold for a while if the company meets certain conditions. In Boeing's case, they agreed to pay over USD 2.5 billion, and in return, the charges would be suspended and they'd avoid a formal conviction, assuming they kept their end of the bargain. DPAs are seen as less harsh because they prevent a criminal conviction from being formally recorded, which can have huge impacts on a company's reputation and business dealings. A guilty plea is much more serious and has lasting consequences.
Right. And what was the time frame for that DPA? What stopped it from running its course?
Well, the DPA was set to expire on January 7, 2024. At that point, if Boeing had held up their end, the DOJ would have dropped the charges for good. But then something big happened just 2 days before that deadline, on January 5th. There was that Alaska Airlines incident where a door panel blew off a B737-9 mid-flight.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That was all over the news.
Right.
Definitely sparked some fresh worries about Boeing's manufacturing and safety practices. So how did that incident torpedo the DPA?
Well, the DOJ basically decided that the Alaska Airlines incident meant that Boeing had violated the terms of their 2021 DPA. So in May 2024, the administration brought those original charges back, and that's what ultimately pushed Boeing to agree to the guilty plea in July 2024, the one they're now trying to wail out of. So you can see how one thing led to another.
Right. Okay, so to sum it all up, Boeing first tried to avoid a guilty plea with the DPA. Then a major safety issue popped up, which the DOJ saw as breaking their agreement. The charges came back, leading to the guilty plea. And now Boeing is reportedly trying to reverse course on that plea, focusing on getting rid of that independent monitor. Has Boeing said anything publicly about this latest twist?
Based on the report, Boeing's keeping quiet about this attempt to withdraw the guilty plea. They've basically pointed any questions toward the DOJ, and from what we know, the DOJ wasn't available to comment when the report came out.
So let's bring it back to our listeners. What does all this really mean, whether you're deep in the aviation world or just someone who flies occasionally? I mean, this news about Boeing trying to back out of a guilty plea just adds another level of complexity to a situation that has already raised some big questions about aviation safety and how effective the regulations really are.
You're absolutely right. This potential for a renegotiated deal or even a full-blown trial, it has some pretty significant and lasting implications. It goes way beyond Boeing's legal troubles. It touches on corporate accountability as a whole, the DOJ's role in ensuring safety, and at the end of the day, the level of trust people have in the aviation industry. Given the tragic loss of life in those MAX crashes, it raises a really important question. What message does it send if a company can try to lessen their accountability for something like that?
It really highlights the whole tangled relationship between legal accountability, corporate responsibility, and the weight of what's happened in the past. It also makes you think about how shifts in politics, who's in power, might influence how justice is pursued, especially when we're talking about big, powerful corporations. It's definitely something to consider as this story plays out.
It is, and maybe the main takeaway for our listeners here is, can we really say there's true accountability? If these huge corporations can seemingly take advantage of changes in the political scene to maybe renegotiate the consequences for actions that have had such devastating effects, that's something to really ponder as this legal saga continues.
Thanks for unpacking all that. This has been Complete Aviation Solutions Deep Dive number 47. We'll continue to follow this story and keep you informed as things develop. Until next time, fly safe, everyone.